Hi, friends. Bruno is still sleeping, so let's see if we can get one more video in. Our last section deals with East Africa. Our sections and our studies of Africa were kind of threefold. First, we talked about the Bantu migrations in the south. We moved over to the West African kingdoms, and our final video concludes with kingdoms and city-states that developed in the east and along the coastline here. The two kingdoms in the east, we have first the kingdom of Aksum and then later the kingdom of Ethiopia that developed along the Red Sea. These cities and the kingdoms were connected by a port, Adulis, which was on the Red Sea, which connected it with the rest of the world. I talked about how the birth of Islam here around the regions of Mecca and Medina is very much so connected via the Red Sea, even though we think of the Arabian Peninsula as kind of like a desert. That's not the case along the coast here, then, too. So these two kingdoms are going to be connected with much of the rest of the world via trade. Ivory was a commodity that was exchanged in the kingdom as far away as India. And by the year 300, King Izana of Ethiopia embraced Christianity as a new religion. And you might say, well, it's so close to where Islam developed. How come Islam wasn't the major religion? Islam isn't going to become a religion until 300 some years later in 632, I think, when Islam becomes the major religion. So Christianity was embraced by King Itzana, and Ethiopia became a Christian nation. Later on, a king named King Lalibela reinforced Christianity as a new religion in the empire and built all kinds of new churches in the area then too. One of them was famously, no, go away, St. George in Ethiopia. And this is really cool. It's a church that's built into the ground. I'm not exactly sure why or how, but it again kind of reflects the way that people use their geography to create new structures. It wouldn't look like a traditional church that might be found in like an American city or so. But yeah, these churches were built into the ground. There's lots of cool videos on YouTube. Seventh graders always think they're kind of cool. They always ask, like, number one, how come they don't fall in? Number two, how does it drain? I don't know, but kind of some cool videos out there on that. Competition did begin to emerge when Islam began its spread. There was conflict. Some people in East Africa converted to Islam, but Christianity still remained the dominant religion of Ethiopia. You can probably see how geography had a factor in that as well, then, too. And this does then reflect a theme that will show up. Wars will often involve competition among these religions as they continue to grow. Going then down to the east along these, we're going to go back to like city states. And our text tells us that by 1400, there was about 40 city states along East Africa, along the coast line here. City states just like the ones we saw in Greece, right? Cities that act with the authority of a country, then too. And our text talks about Kilwa. And Kilwa seems like a pretty cool place. There's this famous traveler called Ibn Battuta, who's just like Marco Polo. He traveled all around the world, and he called Kilwa one of the most beautiful and well-constructed towns in the world. So I like to say that, like, if I were to go back in history, I think it would be kind of cool to live on Crete with the Minoans. And then for Africa, I think Kilwa sounds like a pretty cool place then too. Mombasa in Kenya today was one of those city states as well then too. And by 1498, the Portuguese, again, who I've mentioned, I'm going to draw a picture of my great boat, had developed the sailing technology to be able to travel all the way around the coast of Africa. Bartholomew Diaz did it in 1488. Vasco da Gama did it later. And then they were able to sail all the way to India for trade. So as a result of this, Africans resulted in a contact between Arabs and Africans resulted in a new language called Swahili, which combined Arabic and Bantu words then too. Arab traders had also come down into the region of Kilwa. So then that created this new language called Swahili. Interactions among people, again, spread many things, including ideas then too. We talked a little bit, our section doesn't cover it, but it was actually math that was borrowed from the Arabs by the Portuguese that allowed advances in sailing technology to allow people like Christopher Columbus, Bartholomew Diaz, Vasco da Gama to travel such large distances then too. But by the 1500s, the Portuguese had actually taken over Kiowa, which again reflects a theme. Wars are often fought for competition for resources, and in this case, money then too. And one kind of cool thing I do with Swahili is I ask students, what is this from? This is a text. And then I say, you've all tried to sing this before. And they're like, what is this? And then eventually you can play it. This is actually lyrics that are written in Zulu. It's the beginning of the circle of life. And Zulu was a Bantu language. So we talk about Swahili and its Bantu influences. Zulu is also a Bantu language, and it's kind of cool. By the end of your class period, everyone will be singing The Lion King. And then finally, the last section is something we've kind of encountered before. It's a mystery of this great city that was known as Great Zimbabwe. Much of the silver that was exchanged at Kilwa was mined near Great Zimbabwe, brought here to the port city, and then spread to India and then also north to some of the Arab kingdoms. And it was founded sometime around the year 1100 by Bantu people known as the Shona, and it reached its zenith sometime around the year 1500, but it was destroyed. We don't know how. It's one of those mysteries again. But the ruins are actually preserved on Great Zimbabwe. And I put a picture of the flag of Zimbabwe because I learned that this bird is sitting along the ruins of that city then too. So that's a way that culture and history is prevalent kind of on flags too. And my seventh graders know that I think flags are really, really cool. So yeah, that concludes our last section on East Africa. Thank you for watching.